Welcome to the Movie Zone. Today, we are recapping the 2019 comedy drama movie, Yes God Yes. The story of a Catholic girl who finds herself having tempting thoughts after an AOL chat turns unexpectedly spicy. As usual, spoilers ahead, let's begin. The story begins in a Catholic high school, with posters presenting ideas about abstaining from sex. A teacher, Mrs. Veda, is inspecting the dresses of the incoming students and giving punishments to the students who don't adhere to the proper dress code. A sexually inexperienced but curious fresher, Alice meets with Mrs. Veda and she is asked to be the gift bearer once again for the school mass this afternoon. A teacher, Father Murphy, is teaching a class about sexual education, comparing the male genital to a microwave oven and a girl's genitals to a conventional oven. He explains how guys only need a few seconds to get switched on, whereas ladies require to preheat for a while. He goes on to explain, God made sex for a sole purpose of being able to bear children. Murphy also warns that any sex outside of one man, one woman, and one marriage is against God's plan. One of the students asks whether you can have sex with yourself, implying masturbation. Murphy counteracts the point by asking whether you can have children after having sex with yourself. Obviously no. Father goes on to explain masturbation is against God's plan and sex is forbidden, including masturbation, until you are married, or it is damnation for all of eternity. One of Alice's friends, Laura, comes to Alice and Alice asks if they had to watch the partial abortion video yet. Laura was a bit excited about that one and doesn't want it to be ruined for her, so they skip the topic. Laura asks how the morality class went, and Alice, curiously, asks her whether she knew if masturbating was a sin. Laura states that it's obvious that masturbation is a sin, almost as confidently as Father Murphy. Laura also explains how making her rewind the infamous Titanic car scene twice is also a sin. Alice gets flustered and tells her it was because she didn't hear the line properly, she had no malicious intent. Back home, Alice returns and pets her dog, Gus. She gets some snacks and goes to her computer. She is using the AOL chat room, in which she is playing word scrambles in the categories of movies with strangers. After playing a few rounds of the game, she gets a spam email from an AOL user, sending her pics of he and his wife getting saucy. Alice at first is surprised and closes the image, but her sheer curiosity leads her to open the image back up again. As she is looking the pictures, she gets a message from the same AOL user asking for her age, sex and location. She quickly answers with 22, girl and Iowa. When asked for her pic, she sends the picture of her friend, Heather, instead. The user replies she is beautiful and asks her to cyber roleplay. The user starts talking in sexual innuendos, and Alice doesn't know what to reply. Regardless, she tries to respond to the best of her abilities. In one of the texts, the user asks whether Alice is touching herself during all this. Alice slips her hand into her skirt, but before she is successful to masturbate, her mom calls her and cuts her fun session short. Later in church, Alice is repeating the words of the Bible delivered by the priest. After that, she enters the car with Laura and Anthony. He immediately asks Alice if she had done the deed with Wade last Friday when Stephanie had walked in on them in her sauna. Alice explains they were just back there getting some drinks and they were only gone for a minute. The guy jokingly replies, "A minute is enough for Wade, ouch." During lunch break, Laura, Alice and Anthony are talking about him, listening to the latest Blink 182 album called Enema of the State. The guy turns to ask if Alice knows what enema means. Laura, who is obviously a bit experienced in this area, makes the guy leave, branding him disgusting. After he leaves, Laura casually tells Alice that enema means when you fall in water skiing and water shoots up your buttocks. Just then, another friend of Alice, Beth, comes by their lunch table. Laura asks why she didn't come to her party last weekend. Beth eyes Alice as she explains how she heard things got pretty crazy at the party. She relates everyone talking about what had happened between Alice and Wade. The rumor was that Alice had tossed Wade's salad. Alice is shocked to hear this and denies it immediately, despite not knowing the exact meaning of tossing someone's salad. Later, when she encounters Wade alongside his girlfriend Heather, she notices the two act weird around her. Whole Wade situation makes Alice very angry as she is constantly mocked by classmates. The rumors, however, keep growing and end up reaching Mrs. Veda, who prevents Alice from being the gift bearer for the school mass. She warns Alice if she keeps up her acts, her position as a gift bearer would be threatened. Instead of Alice, Mrs. Veda assigns Heather as the cupbearer. Alice looks on with contempt and anger. During penance hours, Alice speaks of the sins which she has committed but doesn't tell Father Murphy about how she had sexual urges and gets off with a light punishment of doing dishes for a week. Following Father Murphy's orders, Alice goes to the church and prays for forgiveness, but Father Murphy's and Mrs. Beta's words about sex keep echoing in her mind. Both Alice and Laura decide to attend the school's Kirko spiritual retreat, with the two having different goals in mind. Alice wants to return to righteousness, whereas Laura wants to get closer to a famous senior, Nina. When they reach the retreat area, Laura is thrilled to find Nina as her retreat leader. Meanwhile, Alice eyes Chris, a bulky senior, another retreat leader. Infatuated by his bunky build and hairy arms, Alice images licking Chris's hairy arms very sensually. Day 1, question the first. In her room, Nina asks Alice to turn over her cell phone and watch, but Alice only hands her watch to Nina, hiding her cell phone. During lunchtime, Chris is outgoing and eager, and the two quickly become friends, after Alice is assigned to his group. The group is then given a paper listing the various feelings, and the group has to circle the feelings that they might have felt over the past few years. Alice blasts through listing her feelings, and also circles feeling turned on the list. Realizing what mistake she has done, she tries to erase the circle border, but she fails to do so, and she crosses over the word completely as she hands her list to Mrs. Beta. Afterwards, the senior Nina talks about her experience of how she felt completely overwhelmed due to her sister being such an overachiever, which made her feel insignificant. Nina explains how her parents used to dot over her sister, but couldn't care less about Nina herself, even going so far as to notice her when she returned home late at 2 a.m. She confesses that when an accident took place involving both her and her sister, Nina wished her sister to have died in the accident, so that she could be loved again by her parents. Hearing her confession and her story, everyone gets emotional and give her a compassionate hug. That night, while playing with the snake game on her cell phone, Alice realizes that she may enjoy herself by utilizing the vibrating feature on her phone. After using the vibrate feature a couple of times by putting the phone near her crotch, she quickly stops when she notices the crucifix in her room. Day 2, weep the second. On the second day of the retreat, Alice goes on a hike. As Alice is walking with Laura, she babbles about how great Nina is, and how she would spend time with her, while all of Alice's focus is on Chris. Seeing one of the girls around Chris, Alice gets jealous and pretends to be injured to get closer to him. She gets carried in a princess hold back to the nurse's office. Back in her room, Alice is trying to play with her smartphone once again, but Nina interrupts her fun session and seizes her phone. She complains her devious acts to Father Murphy, and he assigns Alice to clean jobs around the retreat home as a punishment. When she finishes her job, she returns back to Father Murphy's office. Once she is alone, she logs onto an AOL chat room from Father Murphy's office computer to ask what tossing salad means. However, before she can ask, the sound of footsteps compels her to quickly shut down the computer and depart. To her dismay, she is unsuccessful in closing the computer completely, but manages to get away in time. She bumps into Nina, who yet again accuses Alice of tossing the salad with Wade, yet another example of Alice's incapacity to escape the rumor. Day 3, except the third. During a session with her retreat group, the group is tasked to share their own stories. One of the guys talks about his sad breakup with his girlfriend, while one of the girls talks about how her grandmother died. Listening to all these sad stories, Alice in a hurry makes up a story about how her dog, Gus, had died from eating chipmunk poison. She couldn't have gone with a more obvious lie. Later that day, Father Murphy discloses the finding of an explicit chat on his computer and commands the culprit to step forward. Of course, no one admits responsibility. Later, he presses Alice to confess to acting on her sexual impulses with Wade, but Alice denies her doing anything. Father Murphy, however, doesn't trust her denials. Wade is confronted by Alice about his failure to refute his role in the rumors spreading, and he walks away without confessing or apologizing. As he leaves, he drops his bracelet containing the name Heather, which Alice decides to keep with herself. On cleaning duty again, Alice sees Nina kissing and then giving a blowjob to another senior leader in the woods. She tells Laura, who refuses to believe Alice, and accuses Alice of sneaking into Father Murphy's office, and calls Alice a pervy maniac. Laura, who is an extremely idealistic girl, ends their friendship. Alice, on her cleaning duty, goes to Father Murphy's office when she sees it empty and thinks of framing Wade for the earlier break-in, by putting the bracelet that Wade had dropped earlier. Alice hides when Father Murphy returns to the office, but to her horror, she notices Father Murphy masturbating to a pornographic movie saved on his computer. Father Murphy was a grade A hypocrite. Outside, Alice kisses Chris when she finds herself alone with him, but he becomes overwhelmed and flees. Alice flees the retreat grounds that night and stumbles onto a lesbian bar, where she and the owner, Gina, talk about how the dread of damnation may skew a teen's growth. Gina counsels Alice and drives her back to the retreat, finally satisfying Alice's curiosity about what tossing salad implies. Day 4, Living the Fourth. Alice meets a socially awkward student on the last day of the retreat. While Father Murphy pulls Wade away after feeding in the bracelet that Alice had left there, in the final group meeting, Alice reminds the retreat guests during a whole group sharing session that everyone is hiding stuff, and she encourages them to treat one another with honesty and respect as Jesus did. Back at school, Alice reassures Chris, who is still uneasy, that they can simply be friends. Returning to reconciliation with Father Murphy, Alice confidently confesses that while on retreat, she witnessed a video of people having sex, both of them aware of the ramifications of her confession, but unable to confront them. Father Murphy assigns a more difficult penance, this time of 100 prayers, but instead of staying in the chapel, Alice returns home to rewatch and masturbate to the Titanic sex scene. What do you think about this fantastic movie? Tell us in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.